given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in the business. Not because they want to do it, just because they heard it pays. And who the fuck wants to be poor knowing that's how we've been raised? Society is getting heavy, I can feel the weight. The pressure of success is like 100 million pounds of shit.
How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tear Talk. Guys, this is a request that was emailed to me. They want to discuss PREA protocols, and they also want to discuss investigating PREA allegations, especially because we have a lot of false allegations. Inmates are motivated. It's weaponized PREA. Basically, we write up an inmate, and then retaliation, the inmate makes up a false allegation. And what do we expect from the investigative authorities? So it's going to be a good dialogue. We'll keep it quick. We'll talk about what needs to happen during the protocol, the communication from the highest level, but also we want to address those false allegations. So guys, this is the topic that you're interested in. Please make sure that you stay to the end, because that's when we're going to discuss the investigation of the false allegations, because there is still a generalized investigation that has to happen. Now, guys, if you haven't, before I go ahead and tell you what you should do about my page, like, subscribe, and all that, I want to make sure you check out our 3 sponsors, right? So we have American Military University. If you guys are looking to get that higher degree, seek education, maybe bring experience back to the classroom, American Military University. Guys, check it out. It's a great online school. Plus, it's been supportive of us in corrections since day one. Day one of Tear Talk. Also, today's video is also brought to you by Guardian RFID. From inmate tracking and cell checks to cloud-based business and artificial intelligence, Guardian RFID digitally transforms jails, prisons, and juvenile detention facilities of every size. Visit guardianrfid.com for more information. And we also have the RAP. So if you guys are unfamiliar, by the way, the RAP, excuse me, let me make sure I read it correctly. Controlling combative subjects quickly and in an upright position so they can breathe has never been more important. Departments such as Washington, D.C., L.A. County, San Diego County, and hundreds of other facilities across the U.S. trust and believe in the RAP restraint. That's the RAP, W-R-A-P. Go to saferestraints.com for contact information and mention Tear Talk to receive instructor training at no cost. Lower liability for your facility and your personnel with the RAP. Give the RAP a call today, 1-800-RAP-911. Guys, there's a link in my description. I'll show you a video of exactly what the RAP is. And don't forget, guys, Inmate Manipulation Decoded is in the market or on the market. You get it at Target, Amazon, a bunch of places, Goodreads. And the link to that is also in the description. So today, my guest is none other than the famous YouTube influencer from another channel about corrections called True Prison Stories. I believe we all know his name, Gary York. Gary, what's up, man?
Hello, Anthony. How you doing? Thanks for having me today.
Hey, Gary, you mind introducing yourself? And, what do you have out there right now? You got the toughest job, correct?
Yes, I'm Gary York. I am a retired from corrections, 28.8 years. I worked the majority of that in the state prison system in Florida, and the other part in as a county in county detention. I have a book called The Toughest Job, which describes how tough a job we have in corrections, detention, law enforcement behind those walls. And I am hoping to help in some way, send a message of how tough our job is and what officers have to go through mentally and physically.
And by the way, Gary, you do that all the time, especially with the YouTube channel. Hey, Gary, so this is going to be a great topic. I know we have a lot of officers that are just tired of what I call weaponized PREA. So basically, they do their job, and then the inmates will make up a false allegation in which we're now dependent on the investigators to get the truth out. But in the end, there's so much of an inconvenience for honest staff who now have to go through this ordeal and then wait for that clearance. And we all know why it's happening. You can have an officer that's on point, getting ready to, maybe get some contraband or something like that, and all of a sudden you get the allegation. Or you can have an officer that's pat frisking and finds contraband, and all of a sudden you get that false allegation. So first off, before we kind of talk about what PREA protocol is, Gary, is it fair for me to say that the inmates are weaponizing PREA?
Yes, and it is so important that we watch out for this, because we know that the inmates will normally go after the officers that are doing their job the way they should. They're doing their searches. They're making the inmates follow the rules. They're finding contraband. So what happens, folks, you all know, those inmates want that officer out of that dorm or that pod, and they don't want you in there because you're doing your job. Therefore, false allegations will arise.
Yeah, now, guys, there's a lot to cover here, so I'm going to speed through it. This is definitely a discussion that could take a very long time. Now, be advised, guys, we'll probably be discussing some of this topic. We'll be in Nebraska Wednesday. I'll be leaving tomorrow, and we're going to be doing a conference. Gary's going to be there through live stream with me. I'm going to have Connie, William Young, and Gary Cornelius, and we're also going to be live streaming, besides Gary, Russ, and Louis Soto. But again, I will be in Nebraska on site, get to meet the lovely Nebraskans. Part of the topics we'll be discussing PREA. Now, real quick, guys, when you have a PREA allegation, all that has to be monitored. So basically, when the inmate makes a PREA allegation, the investigative authority, with the help of what I feel should be the PREA coordinator, which would be probably someone on the administrative end, is going to make a decision based on that allegation of whether a PREA protocol is needed. It's definitely going to be a partnership between administration and the PREA coordinator of that facility. Once it's been determined that a PREA protocol has been initiated, now the inmate making the allegation will be brought to medical. The medical will go ahead and put the stuff in the system, and then the tracking begins. What do I mean by tracking? I mean, once medical puts it in the system, then we start getting these alerts that tell us that, one, we have a new PREA incident put in the system, and then around 45 days or 90 days, we will have to follow up to make sure that the inmate is not being retaliated against for making that complaint. Now, guys, I could talk roughly, but we've covered this before, of the process of a protocol, protecting the integrity of the complaint, protecting the person making the complaint, separating them from the aggressor. I mean, that's for another episode. What we want to get to now is dealing with those false allegations. So right off the bat, Gary, I would like to believe this. If an inmate makes an allegation, sometimes it's tough to determine if the allegation is PREA or not until the investigative authorities make that determination. Now, if the investigative authorities are on site and available, they should literally be talking to that inmate before the PREA protocols have been put in place, so they can make a determination if the PREA protocol is needed. I'll give you an example. If you have an inmate that's saying that, oh, I was during the pat frisk, this person touched my groin, but at that point, maybe contraband was discovered, and maybe you feel, okay, you know what, this inmate's retaliating, but believe it or not, during the pat frisk, maybe there is a chance that the officer could hit the groin, because again, they did find something. So being that this is in accordance with the person's duties to check the inmate, and then again, we did find contraband, we may not necessarily need a PREA protocol. Because having said that, there may be enough evidence and context to know that this could be retaliatory by nature. And then maybe even if you have a video, you can determine that the pat frisk was professional and actually did obviously come up with an outcome, which would be, whatever, drugs or contraband. But the key of this right now, Gary, let me ask you a question is, when an inmate makes an allegation, do we feel that before the protocol is ran, as long as the investigators on site, should they be able to talk to the inmate first and then make the decision if PREA protocol is needed if they're available and on site?
Absolutely. The department heads need to get together and speak as you discussed. You have your IG offices or whoever you use. If you're in the jail, you have your detention deputy. They can all be on board together and discuss it. And you don't just jump into an investigation. You have to see if it meets the qualifications. And yes, you can talk to the inmate first. That's okay. And then determine among the department heads, by your agency's policy and procedure and reporting procedure, should we go to the next step now and report this to the IG's office for further investigation? There's nothing wrong with that. peeking around the corner trying to do something wrong. You as department heads are trying to determine if an investigation is warranted or not.
Yeah, now usually what will happen is we talk about department heads. I mean, I'm definitely leaning on the PREA coordinator and I'm leaning on the investigative authority, because sometimes you have these PREA allegations that are just, they're retaliatory in nature. And usually what's going to happen is the investigative authority is going to do their interviews. They're going to call their higher ups and make a determination based on the context if the PREA protocol is needed. Like, having said that, inmates can use this as a retaliatory measure. I was just successful in finding contraband. So I'm assuming the inmate could make a crazy allegation because, again, I found something on them. They don't want to get charged. So they start to flip the script. So then what happens here is, before we run the PREA protocol, the investigative authorities could talk to the inmate, could get an understanding of what happened. The inmate did have contraband, forward that up to a higher level. And then a higher level could say, you know what, at this point, we understand the context. We understand the officer found some contraband. It looks like it was a professional search, which, led to the discovery of that contraband. Therefore, PREA protocol is not needed. So now, here's the good thing about that. That officer that was successful in finding that contraband winds up not to fall victim to being removed from their posts, stop them from doing their job, stopping them from being productive. Because think about this, guys. Every time we find contraband, there could be a chance that an inmate may want to make some complaint to go ahead and challenge the charge that's coming their way. So what does that do? That's going to disenfranchise a lot of officers from doing their job and looking for that contraband. So is there a balance there, Gary?
Yes, we have to be fair and impartial always in these cases, okay? We have to be unbiased and fair and impartial. So whether we investigate or not, we have to make sure that we're doing everything correctly and we're not choosing sides, because we want to make the right decision whether we need an investigation or not. Why do we want to make the right decision? Well, we want these officers, we want to be fair to our officers. We don't want an officer doing their job to get in trouble. And we still have to maintain our integrity of the agency by being fair and unbiased and look into the situation. So whether we determine we don't need an investigation or we do need an investigation, we must be fair and impartial and do it right for everyone's sake. Because remember, there's those people out there that want to sue the agency for every little thing that comes across. We have to be careful and cross all our T's and dot our I's to make sure that we've done everything correctly.
Now, Gary, you're saying something key that I want to make sure we're on the same page with. When we're making the investigation, just as much as, let's say you have that false allegation on staff, I would like to think that we're putting effort into, yes, is there a concern, doing the proper investigation, being objective? But if it's determined that, especially now with body cams that have sound, if it's been determined that the allegation is false, then we need a result that says the complaint is unfounded. Because here's what my biggest concern is, Gary. So I'm assuming this works the same way with PREA. You could have 4 results, right? Now, you could have a substantiated, which means that inmate made a complaint, turns out to be true. There's evidence to prove it's true. You can have unsubstantiated. Either way, just can't prove it either way. Which is very tough to deal with, because a lot of the complaints against staff may come back unsubstantiated, and then it's hard for administration to want to put that person back at their post, because you haven't proven to me beyond reasonable doubt that that person has been cleared. So we do look for, what we want is the unfounded. I want an inmate that makes an allegation that if it is false, that you give me an unfounded result and the inmate is charged for making that false allegation. I know we don't see much of that, but especially with body cams, there should be no excuse why we're not producing that. And in regards to inmate, because most of the time the false allegations is usually, the officer said that, we could be professional. Officer said, he wants me to suck my blah, blah, or something sexual that is communicated that we probably know is false, but again, very hard to prove. So now what happens is, without that sound, a lot of the times we do the investigation, the internal affairs will interview both parties, and Well, the inmate said he said it. The officer said they didn't say it because there's no proof either way, unsubstantiated. Yeah, but that doesn't really do anything for us. It also doesn't do enough to clear the officer's name, to be honest with you. Now with the body cam, the moment you have that interaction with an inmate, boom, push the button. The inmate said, I said this, what? Go back to the video. Would you hear me say it? No. So why is it still coming back unsubstantiated? Shouldn't it come back unfounded? Now you have the proof that you did not say it. The results from the investigative authority should be unfounded. And now, as administration, I'm able to do what? One, confidently put that person back at that post. But two, save that officer or staff member's reputation by what? Writing up the inmate who made the false allegation. Right? Would you agree that's a part of that, Gary?
Well, absolutely. You know, there's a lot of people opposed to the body cam. They don't want it, but I really think the body cam is a great tool to show that the officers are doing their job correctly. Now, if I had body cams when I was doing investigations and I could have went to that video and looked at it, we could have probably changed a lot of our cases from unsubstantiated to unfounded. We also probably could have got the state attorney to be more on board with us for prosecuting the inmate, because, you know, the attorneys would waver. You know, they say, well, I don't think we just don't quite have enough evidence, even though we believe the inmate made a false allegation. We just don't have enough evidence to go criminal. Well, if you have the body cam and you hand that to the state attorney, they may be more apt to prosecute the inmate. Now, we can write the inmate up administratively, but I wish we could prosecute the inmate as well for making a false allegation. Then the word will get out. You make a false allegation against a staff member. Now these folks are going to charge you criminally. If we can't get some criminal charges on these inmates for false allegations, they're going to continue to play this game. And I call it a game because that's all they're doing.
Right. And guys, it's very important that we have this dialogue, because in the end, there has to be some level of accountability, because the inmates are going to continue to weaponize it. So again, I do think the body cams can control that. The false allegations. By the way, the fourth outcome will be not PREA. And that's after the investigation has determined that. I would like to say this. If you have an proactive investigative unit, and again, we're talking about their working hours, if an inmate makes an allegation, they can talk to the inmate, and then they can make that determination if PREA is needed or not. So if they make that determination at that point that it's not PREA, then we're not running any PREA protocols. We're not going through the whole process only to do an investigation and for it to come out to be not PREA. You know, it's tough. Sometimes I get it. Sometimes you have to do the investigation to make that determination. But there are some things that just right at face value, you know, this is either retaliatory or it's just a bogus complaint that doesn't even fall within the PREA standard. So that not PREA, I would like to see that discovered a lot more before the PREA protocol has been implemented. But with that said, obviously sometimes there could be stuff that's discovered later on that could make the determination that it's not PREA, including, believe it or not, prosecutors, if they have two parties, now don't get me wrong, no inmate can consent to sex, but if they have two parties that willfully have sex and they're both maybe a couple, whatever it is, and you know it's not rape, you know, after they do their interview exhaustive measures, they realize that this is a couple, that may turn out to not be a PREA. Could be, depending on the agency, because again, the prosecutor is not going to take it. I'm going to tell you that right now. You know, just food for thought. Again, that could change from agency to agency, but for the most part, if they're willing, and it's two inmates, even though inmates don't have the right to consent, once they've exhausted all measures and they've proven that these inmates are lovers and they both did it willingly, whatever the word is, willingly, the prosecutors are not going to push it. So therefore, it could turn out to be, you know what, it may not be considered a PREA violation. So again, that could differ, because again, inmates don't have the right to consent. But I just wanted to have this video because false allegations, one, threaten the safety of our facility, because usually the false allegations happen to officers or staff members that are doing their job. So if we continue to allow these false allegations to occur, the threat to our facility happens because you're going to have staff that becomes disenfranchised, are not doing their job because they're like, hey, why am I going to do my job? Because inmates just going to make a false allegation on me. Or inmates start to have control, which means I know this officer is good. I'm going to get the officer out of my unit. So it's very important that the investigative authority, the PREA coordinator, and even the custody majors are on the same page with what needs to be done with these false allegations, which include, you know, again, if you get an officer that's good at their job and a false allegation is made, mind you, that false allegation could cause that officer to be pulled from their post, limited inmate contact. So again, if you have a good officer, that does pose a threat to the facility. So what we need to do is, one, again, we need to make sure the investigation moves quick, but again, still cover everything. But, you know, we're not leaning on it for 60 or 90 days, you know, because again, you know, you want to make sure that if the officer is clear that you've exhausted all measures, that you have that officer back on their post doing their job, you know, professionally. But the other thing, Gary, and I'm sure you'll agree, is that if we don't, when it comes to these investigations, if we don't start, you know, holding these inmates accountable for the, you know, the false allegations, in the end, like I mentioned before, who's really running this facility?
And to carry on with what you're saying, now here in Florida, when I was assigned investigations, I had 45 days. And there's a reason for that. And officers out there, it's a pain in the neck, but I have to do my investigation. Then it gets turned in and my supervisor reads it and signs off. Then it goes to Tallahassee and it has to go through the chief inspector. And then it has to go to the inspector general, and then it has to go to legal. And there's all kinds of channels it has to go through. If anybody's on leave during that time, God forbid, now you've got another week you have to wait. So that's why I want to tell some folks that if you ever wonder why, 45 days is still a long time. Anthony mentioned 60 and 90, but 45 days is still a very long time to wait for an answer. Unfortunately, though, it takes time sometimes, but we don't want it to take forever and ever and ever, where you're sitting out there in Wonderland wondering when you're ever going to be back to official duty. It's not good for the officer. It's not good for the officer morale. I would like to see some agencies trying to speed up allegations against officers when they can. Try to speed up that investigation and make it priority, and set some of the other investigations on the back burner, because we have to think about our mental health of our officers. This is stress, folks, when you're under investigation, you know, and when you're under investigation for a false allegation, that is stress on you, probably your family too, because you go home to your wife and say, hey, I'm under investigation. It's stressful. We also want to know
something. I want to know something you said that's very important. When we say speed, it's not speed through, it's speed to the investigation. I want to make sure people know that we're still crossing our T's, dotting our I's, but we're making it a priority. I don't want people to think, oh, you're going to speed through and you're going to overlook. It's not what we're saying. So let me rephrase, because I may have made a mistake. Speed to, not speed through. Would you agree with that, Gary?
No, exactly. We're, as we said earlier, we want to do a thorough, unbiased investigation, and we want to do it properly. But we also want to think about our officers. Their, you know, the stress that it's putting on them. An honest officer, an innocent officer is under investigation, and they have to sit back and wait for this process to take place. I do want to say one thing on these investigations, folks. Allegations against officers, please, for the agencies, investigators, investigator supervisors, we want to have experienced investigators on these. Not that a new rookie investigator is not honest and going to do it unbiased, but we want people who have been there, done that, because these are our fellow officers. Just because I was, you know, I was an officer, but when I became a prison inspector, that doesn't mean that the front line is not my fellow officer. So we want to have experienced people on the job that know the ins and outs of the prison. Isn't that, in your mind, much more fair to an officer with a false allegation than somebody who is just learning the ropes? I don't think we should put rookies on cases with allegations against staff.
Yeah, it's the reputation of the officer that matters, reputation of the staff member. Again, just as much as we, look to investigate these concerns, you still want to make sure that if the concern's unfounded, that the agency does what it can to protect the reputation of the officer, or the staff member. Because again, I'm telling you, good staff members have stopped doing their job because they're concerned of the false PREA. And even though it's like, well, if they didn't do it, they have nothing to be concerned about. Guys, it's inconvenient. You could have a bid, know what your schedule's like, and all of a sudden they pull you because of these allegations. And again, eventually you're going to stop having officers that want to do their job. I mean, it's that much of an inconvenience. It really is. I mean, in some cases, if, they could limit you from inmate contact. And by the way, guys, if there's an active investigation, maybe it could stop you from getting overtime because you're limited to what you can do. So it's not something that you want to go through frequently. And again, it's really dependent on the investigative authority to give us some solid information when the results are back. Like, I mean, not unsubstantiated. Make the effort to, just like you're making the effort to prove it objectively, if you can't prove it, are we making the effort to disprove it? It seems like, well, we can't prove it, we'll let it go. Hold on, it's not done yet. If you can't prove it, then maybe you should go back and try to disprove it, if that's the case. But that would help out a lot of the false allegations, because in my mind, the biggest concern, I was going to say the biggest concern is that these false allegations really are a threat to our facility because it's allowing the inmates to maneuver staff. But yeah, I'm sorry.
Well, I love what you just said, because we have evidence that proves a case, right? We collect evidence in our investigations, but we also need to gather evidence to disprove the allegation. That evidence is just as important on the other side that shows this did not happen. More important to our officers who are honest and didn't do what was alleged. So evidence gathering works two ways, folks. I just wanted to kind of follow up with what you said, Anthony.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just don't think there's enough effort. I think that people get so tied up in the investigation that they're happy to say, oh, wait, it's unsubstantiated. But hold on. I mean, you want to go a little extra and now see if it could be disproven? Because again, you have an officer's reputation on the line. And I want people to know something. The investigative authority also has to look at the context and the motive behind the allegation. So again, an officer discovers contraband, the officer is expecting at this point a weaponized PREA attack. And so are the investigative authorities. It's almost literally A and then B. Officers find especially if they find the contraband on the inmate's person. If they pat frisk and this inmate has drugs or something like that, it's almost inevitable that the inmate's going to come back and make some bogus PREA allegation. So again, if there's something you can lean on that can disprove it, which includes, maybe a camera of a professional search, or even if you can lean on the context and say, you know what, I believe this case to be unfounded because prior to this allegation, the inmate was found in their possession drugs. So obviously the officer had their reasons to do their check. So I think the motive behind it all, the context of the situation could be something that we could lean on to show that the case is unfounded. I think a lot of people don't look at the motive behind the complaint. Like, I would love to see that guy. I mean, can you utilize that knowing that, you could see that it is retaliatory because it seems to be that the officer did A, so the inmate quickly retaliated by doing B. Can that be used to make a case unfounded?
If the officer has dealt with this inmate and has found this inmate in possession of contraband prior, has had dealings with this inmate, and this can help prove retaliatory measures by the inmate, and there is no other evidence to show what this inmate is saying is true, you have to have that in your investigative report. You have to have copies of the disciplinary report and the incident report written by the officer as exhibits A1 and A2 within that investigation to show that the officer was doing their job. If you don't get those documents with the officer's statement and add that as exhibits in your investigation, folks, you're not doing your job correctly to help prove this officer is innocent.
Hey, Gary, but could the discovery of a motive, like you just mentioned, having those reports ready in play, the context of the situation, it being seen as retaliatory because the officer did their job, could that be enough for the agency or the investigative authority to say, you know what, we're going to make it unfounded as opposed to unsubstantiated?
Yes. Absolutely. I was just going a little in depth on saying they need to be exhibits in the report for that reason. We've just unfounded this case. Well, where's my evidence to show that? And that's why we put all this in the report as exhibits that backs up. Like I have my typewritten report, right? I need to have my exhibits to back up my report.
Yeah. So guys, if you're an officer and you're going through these allegations, and you feel it's retaliatory against you, I mean, you know what's funny is inmates are going to have, we have retaliation monitoring when it comes to PREA, right? So if an inmate makes an allegation, we have to make sure that they're protected from any form of retaliation. Maybe we should do the same when an officer does their job and finds the contraband. Maybe we as an agency should do whatever we can to protect the officer from retaliation from the inmate, which could include a false allegation. You know, again, within the context of this, I mean, it's just food for thought, but something that was just discovered that was never said in this channel before. I don't think that's a bad idea. Officer finds contraband. Can we make sure that the investigative authorities are making, you know, sure that, hey, this was discovered, you know, now we kind of figure in context, this could be retaliatory. So therefore, you know, let's protect this officer's reputation. And I think that if you're that officer and you have been pulled and they come back with the result, I think you should say, hey, listen, you know, I just found stuff. You know, this inmate wants me out of the unit. Can we push for something unfounded to protect my reputation and administration as well? How comfortable are you with putting someone back to the post on an unsubstantiated case? We want those unfounded. Okay, Gary.
Well, to help the case be unfounded even more, if the officer found contraband on the inmate and it's in the form of pills or drugs, the investigator should also go to the phone records and check the inmate's incoming and outgoing mail for a while. We may learn more and even open another investigation on drug introduction coming into the jail or prison. That even helps unfound the case more.
Yeah, guys, this was definitely a needed discussion. Weaponizing PREA, you know, I think it's something that we need to put out there. Again, I'm not going to say this conversation is going to head and change practices across the country, but it's good for us to be aware of it. And then maybe the investigators that are doing these investigations, maybe they can get an understanding of maybe we could do a little bit more. You know, because to me, maybe the quick resolution is let me be done with it unsubstantiated. Guys, give it a little bit more. You know, can we, you know, this was connected to the officer's search. Can we do something to protect the officer's reputation, but also, you know, let these inmates know we're not messing around, because in the end, these false allegations are literally making the facility a lot less safe. It's controlling how we maneuver our staff. Hey, Gary, anything you'd like to say in closing?
Well, I want to tell everybody, stay safe. Let's hope that we're all working together to stop false allegations. Now, as we said earlier, we have to be unbiased in all cases and impartial, but if inmates are using allegations as a weapon to get rid of us, we need to fight that, and we need to take care of the problem. And let's all, as investigators, work with the state attorneys to try to get them to get on the ball and charge these guys. Stay safe. Thank you for your service, and stay strong.
All right, guys, next time I see you guys, I will be in Nebraska sitting next to Connie, William Young, Gary Cornelius. Would have been Gary York, would have been Russ, would have been Louis Soto, but they're still going to attend. And then we'll get a video of the panel discussion, and we'll go ahead and put that on the channel as well. But this was a great dialogue. I think it was a needed discussion. Gary, thank you for coming on. Don't forget Inmate Manipulation on the Market, Amazon. Check it out. It's in the links. And also Gary's book, author of The Toughest Job. Guys, you know, these are great reads. If you get a chance, please pick up the book. Now, if you haven't, the show Tear Talks for you, brave men and women at work and correction. So please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Stay